The Oscars are coming up, which means that everyone has one thing in mind. Best Picture, which was originally won in 1929 by Wings, a film we've actually covered on the podcast. Now, Wings itself was actually released in 1927, so today I'm asking the question, what if Best Picture existed for the 10 years prior to that? Yes, we are going to be going deep into the silent era today, and I'm going from 1926, the year before Wings actually came out, back to 1917. I'm also not just going to pick the 10 best films because that would be too easy, and also I would argue that the Academy themselves don't do that. So I've come up with a bit of a logic, but again, who says that the Academy use that either? And that is quite simple. Pretty much all of the Best Picture winners from the early years of the Academy Awards were one of the highest grossing films that year, so I've taken those lists, but again, I've not just picked the highest grossing film of each year, because that also would be too easy. I've picked 4 films from each year, some of them being some of the best films of those years, some of them being some of the highest grossing films of that year, and then I will debate each one and pick a winner. Simple? Well, follow along. And if you have seen any of these films, do let me know. I've seen a few, but again, we're talking about 40 films from 1926 prior, so don't slate me if I haven't picked your favorite. My 4 films I've selected for 1917 are The Gulf Between, Cleopatra, The Little American, and A Romance of the Redwoods. Now, you may notice that 2 of those films are directed by a man by the name of Cecil B DeMille. You're going to see his name a lot in this video. However, I'm instantly just going to let you know that I'm not going to be picking either of Cecil's films from that year. So we're looking at either Cleopatra or The Gulf Between. Now, some of you may be looking at this and saying, The Gulf Between, what on earth is that? Well, fun fact, it's the first ever Technicolor movie. That, however, will not be enough for it to win, because in 1917, Cleopatra, which is an almost entirely lost film, again, that's a thing I'm going to have to reference a few times, was by far and away the biggest film that year. It had over double the box office of the second most successful film that year. Cleopatra wins the Academy Award for Best Picture in 1917. 1918, and here we go. We've got 3 more Cecil B DeMille films. Oh boy. We have Old Wives for New, The Squaw Man, and The Whispering Chorus, all from Cecil B DeMille. And then we have Tarzan of the Apes. Now, straight up, I am giving one of Cecil B DeMille's films the Academy Award this year, and although it was the highest grossing film that year, Old Wives for New is not going to be it, because it was probably a bit too taboo to win an Academy Award that early. It's got divorce in it. Which leaves us with 2. And fun fact, The Whispering Chorus, directed by Cecil B DeMille, is considered by many to be the first ever psychological drama. So, I'm going to award it the Academy Award for Best Picture for 1918. I'm not going to lie to you guys, 1919 is going to be a pretty easy one, because although it was not even in the top 3 highest grossing films that year, we have a clear Academy darling on our hands, shall we say, early on. And no, I'm not talking about Cecil B DeMille, although he did direct Male and Female. I'm not talking about Lon Chaney, who was in The Miracle Man. I'm not talking about Mary Pickford, who starred in Daddy Longlegs. No, with this Academy darling who I'm referencing, I'm of course talking about one D.W. Griffith. Yeah, he had 2 massive films that I'm not going to talk about, but they were enormous and smashed all sorts of records. So I think at this point in time, whenever D.W. Griffith drops a motion picture, it's probably going to sweep up the awards, and Broken Blossoms is exactly that picture that I'm talking about. We know the Academy have their favourites, and also I can't just give it to Cecil B DeMille every year, so D.W. Griffith's Broken Blossoms takes home the Academy Award for Best Motion Picture in 1919. We're into the 20s, and boy was there a bit of a star at this point by the name of Douglas Fairbanks. We're going to talk about him quite a bit, because he starred in The Mark of Zorro, which is my first nomination for 1920. I've also got Something to Think About, which, who would have thought of it, is directed by Cecil B DeMille. I have also got Why Change Your Wife, which is one of the many marriage family films that Cecil B DeMille made in this time. Yes, him again. And of course, another massive drop from one D.W. Griffith, Way Down East. Now, I did say that for this video, I wasn't just going to pick the highest grossing film of each year, but I do think it's worth noting that Way Down East from D.W. Griffith received almost double the box office of the second most. Like, whenever there's like a clear, like Cleopatra, whenever there's a clear just domination, I think Best Picture back then would have just gone to it. So, Way Down East, D.W. Griffith, he's getting back-to-back Best Picture wins with Broken Blossoms, and now Way Down East, which I'm giving the 1920 Academy Award for Best Picture to. Right, 1921 is a really interesting one. I won't lie to you. So, we've got The Sheik. If you can tell by my face, The Sheik is not winning. But I did say that I'd pick 4. But besides The Sheik, we've got The Three Musketeers, The Kid, and The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Now, maybe looking at those posters and those directors, you might, notice a few things. And yeah, The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse at that time was a massive film. It made an abhorrent amount of money, like well over $4 million. We're talking film budgets that are like in the hundreds of thousands. So 4.5 million is wild. However, Charlie Chaplin can kind of not really be denied in this era, I feel. And I don't see any other circumstance. I know like you can't just retroactively give Best Picture to things, which is literally what I'm doing. But like, if you were to take this whole 10 years, I don't see where else Chaplin would have won Best Picture. Therefore, I think The Kid is definitely Charlie Chaplin's strongest contender for Best Picture. And I'm going to give it to him. Yes, the 1921 Best Picture goes to Charlie Chaplin's The Kid. 1922, and admittedly, this is the year that I definitely know the least about. We've got 2 films from a certain Cecil B DeMille. We have Saturday Night, and we have Manslaughter. We also have a film by the name of Blood and Sand, which was released by Paramount. And then we have Robin Hood with that guy who I referenced earlier, Douglas Fairbanks. Worth noting, Douglas Fairbanks was a box office magnet. That guy, you put him on a poster, he made that movie quite a lot of money. I also think it's worth noting that back then, I think the Academy would have given awards to more out there films, the likes of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Phantom of the Opera, Tarzan, not necessarily for Best Picture each year, but like Best Actor or Best Actress or Best Effects or whatever. I think they would have won it. I think those more fun, adventurous films were such successes to audiences and have resonated so much even still. I don't think that in the silent era they would have necessarily been snuffed at or anything. I think they would have picked up plenty of awards. And Robin Hood, which, is a rather fun adventure film from 1922, starring Douglas Fairbanks, will be my choice for the 1922 Academy Award for Best Picture. And speaking of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, we're into 1923 with, again, one of the most interesting Best Picture races we have. We have The Covered Wagon. It's occupying the chic role. We have Harold Lloyd's Safety Last. You've all seen that image somewhere. We have The Hunchback of Notre Dame, starring Lon Chaney. And we've got The Ten Commandments, directed by Cecil B DeMille. They are 3 massive contenders. Now, honestly, if I was to do a separate video on Best Actor, I think Lon Chaney definitely wins it for The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I don't think anyone could dispute that. If you go back and read all the reports and reviews of films from that year, which is literally what I have done for this video, you will see that Lon Chaney's performance in The Hunchback of Notre Dame absolutely blew audience and critics' minds. So I think it wins Best Actor, but I don't think it's going to win Best Picture. Which leaves us with 2 very different films. We have a massive religious epic from Cecil B DeMille, which he would actually remake into one of the highest grossing films in history in the 50s, which didn't win Best Picture. And we have Safety Last, which is one of the most iconic, silent, slapstick comedies ever made. And when you think of the silent era, you do tend to think about those Buster Keaton films, those Charlie Chaplin films, and those Harold Lloyd films. So it is a real toss-up here. And again, I'm not picking what I think is the best film. I'm thinking what would win the Academy Award for Best Picture. And to really pull the curtain back, this is the only category that I hadn't decided on. prior to videoing. I would hope that I would come to a conclusion before or during my ramblings of the hypothetical Best Picture winners pre 1927. And look, ultimately, I think the Academy took themselves very seriously, especially early on. They were picking either lavish musicals or real gritty dramas. I am gonna go with, just because the era of comedy I think is represented with The Kid, I don't think they would feel as obliged to give it to another comedy. I'm gonna give it to The Ten Commandments, which might not be a particularly well liked choice from me, but hey, it's the Academy. They don't always get it right, do they? That is my pick for the 1923 Best Picture Academy Award. I ain't gonna lie to you, 1924, I think we have a really easy one. So we have The Seahawk, we have Girl Shy, we have Secrets, and then we have The Thief of Baghdad. Directed by Raoul Walsh, an incredible director, starring Douglas Fairbanks. The Thief of Baghdad wins. I don't think there's any real debate. It was a really good year for cinema that year in terms of like box office spread. There was like a bunch of movies that made over $1 million that year. All of the films that I just mentioned made over $1 million that year. But The Thief of Baghdad, again, if you were to go back and read the reviews, it blew people away. It's considered one of the greatest films of all time upon release. Its effects, its sets, it just blew everyone away. Douglas Fairbanks, absolute Academy darling, according to my fictional awards. Raoul Walsh obviously would go on to be one of the greatest directors of that era. So yeah, Thief of Baghdad wins. Fight me. That was the easiest pick of them all, other than Cleopatra. 1925 is definitely the strongest year. 1925, we are rocking with The Big Parade, which you may think occupies the chic role, but it doesn't. The Big Parade was a monster success. One of the most profitable films of the silent era. The Gold Rush, one of Charlie Chaplin's greatest silent films, full stop. The Phantom of the Opera, one of Lon Chaney's greatest silent films, full stop. And Ben-Hur, A Tale of Christ. Christ is right. So I think I alluded to it earlier. I don't think that Chaplin wins it this year. I think Chaplin gets his Best Picture win way back with The Kid. I don't think he wins it. I also don't... I think if the Academy were picking, they'd probably pick The Big Parade. But I don't think The Big Parade would win, because although it was incredibly profitable, it wasn't necessarily the highest grossing film or the most talked about film amongst critics that year. So I don't think it's going to be The Big Parade either, which leaves us with The Phantom of the Opera or Ben-Hur, A Tale of Christ. Now, if you've seen The Phantom of the Opera, which I have, from 1925, it holds up. It is a fantastic film from Universal. Lon Chaney Jr., nope, that would be his son. Lon Chaney is fantastic in the film. The effects are incredible. The scene where he's playing the piano and he looks down the camera and blah is chef's kiss. That is cinema. But Ben-Hur, A Tale of Christ, for all the animal cruelty that was on set on that film, my God, don't look into that if you are squeamish, is literally one of the biggest films ever at that point. So it was also like one of the most promoted films ever. Like, they played the game well. So, you know, if this was the Academy Awards, I think Ben-Hur, A Tale of Christ would win solely on how heavily they marketed the film, which, you know, tends to work. I think Ben-Hur, A Tale of Christ is going to win, and did win, my hypothetical fictional Academy Award for Best Picture for 1925. And now we're at our last year, and this is an interesting one. We have probably the only case, maybe except for like Tarzan from way back, of me shoehorning in a classic that definitely deserved to do better upon arrival, which is The General with Buster Keaton, because I just thought it was criminal that Buster Keaton still hasn't been mentioned in this. We have What Price Glory, we have Beau Guest, or Jest, and we have The Black Pirate. The Black Pirate was also released in Technicolor and wowed people and had Douglas Fairbanks in it. I think it's a no-brainer. I do think that The General is one of my favorite films of the 1920s from America. Don't get me wrong. But again, we gotta be cynical about this. We gotta think like the Academy. I think The Black Pirate would have won, which is why I'm giving the 1926 Academy Award for Best Picture to The Black Pirate. There you go. There's 10 more Best Picture winners for you all to watch. You thought you were done on your letterbox checklists with your 100%. Well, no, you're not finished now. Feel free to try and watch as many of them as possible. Few of them are lost. Few of the nominees are lost. As I said, those goddamn fires. And yeah, that was obviously something different. I was originally planning on doing this as like an article and then submitting it, but I figured that as a video it would be more entertaining, because who doesn't love movie posters, amongst other things. If you liked this video, please leave a like on the video. Of course, leave a comment. What would you have changed? What did you enjoy? What films have you seen? What ones have you not? What would you have awarded? And if you want me to do something similar to this, let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much, and goodbye.